Hi, my name is Rhonda Smith. I'm the host of the Recover, Restore, Re-Energize Your Life show, and today's guest is Gai Comans, and Gai is the founder of Empowered Living. And welcome to the show, Gai.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm really pleased to be here.
Great. And so tell us a little bit about your business and what Empowered Living is really all about.
Okay.
And tell us about you and your story as well.
Okay, so I might tell you about my story first, and then I can tell you a little bit about how the business kind of came about because of that. So I guess what people find most interesting about me is that I worked as a corporate executive for 29 years, and as part of that role, I was a strategic leader. So I had to decide how to spend time, energy, and money in a business that wasn't working so well. And then I built businesses from very small to very large, multi-billion-dollar businesses. And then on the 29th anniversary of being with my company, I resigned. And then since then, I've really lived and worked around the world for the last 5 years. And I think that's when I talk to people about a lot of things that I've done, that's what they find to be most interesting. So how did I step aside from a life that seemed normal to everybody else, do something that seemed very unnormal to people? And my business fits into that because what I help women do is to, after a breast cancer experience, is to elevate their energy and their spirits, to really empower their life again, and then to say yes to a life-changing experience where they can emerge out of their survivorship experience and back into the woman that they are.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry, were you going to say something else?
Yeah, so I think it's what I ended up doing was applying all the skills that I learned in business to help women move forward at a point in their life when they needed some help.
Okay, and so it was your breast cancer experience that led you or inspires you to live a more empowered life. Can you talk about the process that you went through to arrive at that? Well, I guess it's always a journey, not necessarily a destination, but what was it about your breast cancer experience that really led you to that point or inspired you to want to live a more empowered life?
Okay, so when I was diagnosed, I was 38. It was a diagnosis that was very aggressive. So when I spoke to the doctors, they were saying, it's very aggressive. We give you a 1 in 10 chance of surviving it. If you decide to have treatment, which for me was surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, more chemotherapy, if you decide to do that, the chances are better, providing the treatment goes well. And by that, they meant that it was very smooth and I got no more lumps. And in the first round of chemotherapy, which was over a 4-month period, I got 6 new lumps. And they basically said, we don't have any statistics now to guide where you might end up, so get your affairs in order. And it's a really interesting place to be because it brings up a lot of fear. But I guess the way I approached it was in trying to stay in my empowerment state. So it was really about what are the factors that I can control and how do I spend my time, energy, and money on the things that I can control. So, the things that I could control at that time were I spent a lot of time, it was 14 years ago now, I spent a lot of time in the library researching about, what things I could do, like meditation, yoga, what things I could do to really stay in that empowered space. And how did I put everything that I knew around business into developing a strategy for my life? And particularly a strategy for me at that point was just staying alive through treatment. And it was kind of interesting because I needed to then look at what I did physically, what I did emotionally, and what I did spiritually, and bring all that into being to make sure that I did what I could control and I didn't worry about the things that I couldn't control. So, the doctors were saying I had a 1 in 10 chance. I couldn't control that. What I could control was, meditating through chemotherapy so that I gave myself that view that chemotherapy was a really good thing that I was doing for myself. And really started to set my life up, particularly in that period of time, around everything I needed to do around just staying alive through that treatment process. And it's a challenging, one of the most challenging times in my life. But I've always been very pragmatic. I've survived a lot of other things as well, and I see that cancer was one of the experiences that I survived, certainly the most life-threatening. And it made me look at my life in a way that I hadn't actually done before.
And so, can you elaborate a little bit more on what you just said in a way that you hadn't experienced before?
Yeah, so I was 38, and up until that point in my life, I had lived by what I kind of expected that you should do. So you should, grow up, you should get a good career, you should find a nice man, marry him, you should buy a nice house, have a nice car. And I did all the things that society would expect were normal for someone who was 38 years old. But I think the realization that I had was I might not have lived to 40, and I really didn't think that I'd lived my life yet. I thought that there was so much more that I wanted to do with my life other than just going to work, having that experience that seemed normal for me up till then. It didn't seem so normal anymore. And I knew that I wanted the rest of my life, no matter how long that was, to be different, and for me to make different decisions around it as well.
Okay. And so, how do you live an empowered life now, and what does that really look like?
Okay, so I think when I really, through that period of treatment, which was 10 months for me, it was really just about staying alive. And then what I realized when treatment finished was there was so much help. So I had, doctors, nurses, family and friends all gathered around me during treatment. And I had a lot of support. And then when I finished, it all disappeared. So all at once. So the doctors went back to other patients, so did the nurses. My family and friends and colleagues just wanted the experience to be over. And what happened for me, I hit depression, and I've never been depressed before or since. And I really got stuck in that space of I don't know what I can control anymore. So I'd never had a cancer experience before, but I felt that I should just know how to deal with it. And what I found was when I started approaching it from a beginner's mind, so, what are the things, if I looked at it from a business perspective, what were the things that I needed to spend time on, energy on, and money on that were actually going to make me feel more whole as a person? And to start looking at things differently to how I did before. So the process I used was to say my energy had all been on staying alive. Now it had to be on what I wanted my life to look like. So I looked at 8 key lifestyle aspects, which for me were around health and wellness, around spiritual growth, around creating this inner sanctuary, connection and community, so that was the piece to other people, my career, abundance, and then adventure. And what I did was looked at all those aspects of my life and looked at how I wanted to feel in each of those. So how do I want to feel? What did healthy look like for me? What did having a really good career look like for me? What did the spiritual growth aspect look like for me? And then what were the actions I needed to take to bring those things into being? So how, in some respects, could I breathe new life into the life that I was living and direct it in a way that I really felt empowered in, rather than just felt like it was something I had to do so that I fit in with everybody else. So
what were some of the specific things that you did? Some of the activities that you just referred to?
Okay, so from creating that inner sanctuary space was around, I knew that I wanted to do yoga every day, and what that meant for how did I bring that into being? I needed to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and practice yoga for half an hour. So I knew what it looked like. I wanted to do yoga, and then I found a way to fit it into my day. I knew that I wanted meditation as part of my daily practice. So every day I'd wake up at 10 to 5 and I'd meditate for 10 minutes, get up, do yoga, and then go on with my day. So it really had to be me saying yes to all the things I put on my list. And one of them was I needed to eat. I wanted to make sure that I was eating a really healthy diet and one that would support me to live in my best health. So then I had to do research around what that looked like. And I really threw out everything that I knew before and really started from the beginning again and said, okay, well, what does healthy eating look like now? How much water do I need to drink? And then from that, that spiritual growth side, I was a very closed down corporate woman 10 months before when I was diagnosed. And my brother had given me 2 crystals. So from that growth side, I really wanted to find out more about, what the crystal energy was. And, I would never have looked at any of that stuff as a corporate woman. But, there was something there that was drawing me to want to find out more about it. And the connection piece for me was really about, I wanted to connect to friends. And I really wanted to be present to them, or present for them when we were connecting. So I picked 3 or 4 people that I wanted to have a conversation with. And I'd make a date for them to have that conversation. So if I couldn't sit down and have a coffee with them or go for a walk with them, we'd make a date so that when we spoke on the phone, we were both really present for the conversation. And that was probably different to how I'd done it before. So, before I might have been talking to someone and doing an email. And what I saw that as afterwards was being disrespectful to them and me for not giving them the time that I promised to give them, or the energy that I promised to give them. And then it was about, once I had all those things, I had a list of a number of things that I wanted to achieve. I then had to put time, energy, and money around achieving them. And one of the tools that I used was to condense what that lifestyle looked like into one sentence. And one of the things that I wrote in that sentence was that I wanted to control money, not be controlled by it. So I put a sentence around, what healthy eating looked like, what spiritual growth looked like, and then I typed it all up, laminated it, and put it in my shower. Put it in my wallet, put it by my desk at work, so that everywhere I went, I was constantly being reminded of the things that I'd already said were important to me. And it enabled me to say yes to those things and a clear no to everything else. So I find when I talk to people, might say things like, I can't afford this, I can't do that, I won't do that, I don't have time for this. And what I would say is, if that's in your language, then that's a really disempowering way to live. So perhaps change it to, I want to eat healthy, and eating healthy is more important to me than watching television. So I then took a position of empowerment where I could say, I'm doing this and it's more important than that. So I was saying yes to the right stuff and no to the wrong stuff, I guess.
Okay, so what I find really interesting is that you talked about you had a very important corporate job. So that means you were very driven as an individual. Yes. Is that a safe thing to say? But it sounds, yes, yeah. But it sounds like now you feel more empowered than you did when you had the corporate job, and a different sense of self. Is that accurate?
Oh, that's very accurate. I think, look, when I look back at the person I was when I was diagnosed, I was in the chase for perfectionism. I wanted to be the perfect employee. I wanted to be the perfect leader, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter and daughter and friend and family member. And that search for perfectionism for me was killing me. And I was so stressed around trying to make sure that all these balls that I had in the air stayed circulating rather than really just enjoying the person that I was. And I wasn't, I look back now and I was incredibly unhappy. And, for me, I'm quite sad that it took a cancer experience for me to change the way I was living. And I think for so many cancer survivors that I've spoken to, it's a very similar story. But it's really something that you don't take a lot of time to look at until something like that happens that makes you.
Right. It gives you a different perspective on your life for sure. I mean, I went through a similar experience myself and really reprioritized, my life and things that were, at least things that I believe were important to me, were no longer high on the priority list. And so very similar experience to yours in terms of sort of reinventing my life and living life in a way that works better for me from a healthier perspective. And so it sounded like you also went through a transformation as a result of your breast cancer experience, which led you to being more mindful about how you're living every day, what you're doing, and taking a more holistic approach to your recovery as well as how you live your life.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what that enabled me to do was to take control back, and to take empowerment back in a period of my life that was so disempowering. And like it's interesting because I talk to different people about their experiences, and I never asked the question of why me ever. I looked at my family, and I had two nieces that were like 12 and 15 at the time, and thought if it wasn't me, it might have been them. I would have preferred it to be me. My sister was not as healthy or fit as I was. My mum was in her 60s, so I looked around my family and thought I was the person that was probably best able to cope with this experience being in our family. And yeah, so I think never asking why me actually helped me to go through it in a much different way as well.
Right. And so what advice would you give to other women about how to live an empowered life? How would you go through that process? And especially for those who aren't necessarily breast cancer survivors or have had a life-threatening illness, such as cancer, to sort of give them the opportunity or be the inspiration for making the changes in your life.
Sure. So one of the things about my corporate job was I had a team of anywhere from 5 people to 160 people. So what happened was I made these changes to my life, and then they started asking me what I was doing and how I was doing it. So I actually worked with them to help them do it as well. And there was a few things that you needed to do. So the first thing I needed to do was really look at all the value, look at my value system with fresh eyes, and look at the things that I valued. So the things like material things became less important. Like my health became the highest value I had, and was the thing that I defended against everything else. So choosing to eat organic food didn't become a choice; it just became something I did. So I'd say first off, we need to look at our values and make sure that your value system's in the right place. And then look at those other lifestyle aspects. So for me, they were the 8 that I looked at. What are the 8 that you're looking at? Or it might be 6, but try and keep it even because you want some balance. And then how do you want to feel? So how do you want to feel? What does health feel like for you? And what does it look like? So, does it look like you've got, your hair looks nice and you're wearing nice clothes because, your body's in tune. So what does it look like? What can you do to achieve that? And then how do you put your time, energy and money behind achieving it? So like things that I did were, if I had a girlfriend that rang me and said, do you want to go out for a glass of wine? I'd say, why don't we go for a walk instead? So I got to exercise and spend time with them in a way that we weren't distracted by anything else. So what I did was found different ways to then achieve what I wanted to achieve, which enabled us both to be empowered. So if I rang a girlfriend and said, let's go for a walk, they'd say yes because it was something that they wanted to do as well. And what I did with the people at work was I had people in my business that were unhappy. They really didn't want to be in their jobs. So we looked at their career and looked at, took it back to, not about earning money, but took it back to what were they going to do with the money that they earned. So I had like one guy who said, well, I want to send my kids to a private school. So he found a different reason for why he worked, other than just coming into the office every day and going through the motions. And what that did was give him a sense of empowerment that what he was doing from a work perspective was really important to his family and his kids. So he took the focus off the work and onto what it actually looked like and how he wanted to feel as part of his family.
And work just became a vehicle to achieve that or to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Instead of it really defining his life and being work being all, well, his life being all about work, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So what he did was he was able to find meaning and purpose in how he earned money because he knew what that was going to give to his family, and particularly to his kids.
Yeah.
And for me, that's really one of the secrets, is to find what the purpose is for you in each of those things. Because if there's no purpose behind it, then it's going to be something that you do for a week and it goes by the wayside.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with being able to live your life from a place of passion and purpose, and I think that makes a big difference in terms of your quality of life and your how you're excited about getting up every day and doing the work that you do. So I think we both have figured out a way to, at least we continue to strive to make that happen for both of us. But I want to go back to something that you said a few minutes ago, and it was all about finding balance. And it made me think about the comment that the president of PepsiCo said recently, and there's been a lot of talk about that, about she doesn't believe that women can actually have it all. And I know it's a little bit off point or the topic for living an empowered life, but then in a way it is, because I think we all thought that as working women and being in the corporate environment and pursuing a professional track, that we could have the career, we could have the family and the relationships, we could do our community service work, we could do it all. And I don't know about you, but I tried that a few times and it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
And so to try to have balance with all those things in your life, I think maybe at some point in time, in an instant or a few seconds, things may be in perfect balance, but I don't think that's something that is sustainable. So going back to what you said about setting priorities based on what your passion and purpose is, or what's really important to you, I think maybe, like I said, the first step. And so what's your thought about that conversation or her comment that she made?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. If I look back at the reasons I left corporate, was really for me around, so there was a couple of things. I'd been in the same company for 29 years, and I had decided a few years ago that that I wanted to live differently. And really, the reason I was still living the way I was because I had fear in my life that I didn't recognize. So I think there's a couple of things. I made decisions based on the way I wanted to live my life, which enabled me to say no to things and say yes to things that I wanted to bring in. So yes, I wanted to sort of, the way I wanted to live from a work perspective looked like this. It looked like I lived anywhere in the world, I worked on a laptop, and I wore jeans to work. So I had a picture of what I wanted my work to look like. And that looked very different to sitting up in a corporate suit. And I had done that for 30 years, and I absolutely loved my company. But I just saw the picture differently. And when I started acting on that picture, the rest of my life felt balanced. But my unbalance was coming from doing a job or being in a career that I didn't see the purpose in anymore. So in response to what you're saying, I think if you can see the purpose in what you're doing, you then start to make decisions that take you further into that purpose and away from things that are probably sucking at you anyway. And if I look at what things were sucking my energy at the time, like in that last kind of year that I was at work, we were going through a major strategic change where we were merging with another company. And because I'd been in the company for 29 years, I'd worked in every division just about of the company as well. I was called in to sit on every committee that there was. So I found myself working from 6 a.m. in the morning till midnight, and I didn't have the passion for it anymore. But I also didn't have the time for the things that I did have passion for. And I was, because we were merging, my job was actually gone, and they wanted me to stay. And I looked at what my life would look like if I stayed, and what my life might look like if I left. And what it looked like was working 6 till midnight every day, having no time for my friends, my family, or myself, as opposed to leaving and just taking some space to look at what life might look like if I lived a little bit differently. So I think you can have what you want, but it just depends if what you want is too much for what you can currently cope with at the time.
And maybe it's not about having it all, but it's more about, I think what you were alluding to is living the life that you want to live, or creating the life that you want to live. And I think it's also important about what you said about really visualizing what that could look like and being true to that and honoring that and focusing your intention on bringing that to life and making that a reality. Because you know, you have to start at some place. If you want to, if you're not happy with your life and you want to change your life and become more empowered to do something about it, first of all, I think it's important to tap into what your passion is, or realize what that is, and then from that you can create your vision about how you want your life to be from a work perspective, personal perspective, socially, and then focus your intention on really making that happen and taking the steps in that direction, as opposed to focusing on things that kind of drive you away and maybe drain your energy, and it's not consistent with that.
Yeah.
Is that part of what you talk about to women in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think that there was, if I looked at where I was at the time as well, like I was, I had divorced, so I was a single woman. I had this career that gave me a lot of personal power, so I was a very senior woman in the organisation, and that gave me a lot of personal power, and it was kind of a definition of who I was. The thing that, there was two questions that enabled me to step out of where I was then and into leaving work and not having another job to go to, which people were just like, you know, you are crazy. And that was this question. So it was, what was I doing in my life to stay alive? And when I answered that question, that's when I found the fear was actually hiding. And I didn't think I had fear in my life, but I found tons of it. And then what was I doing to live? And the things I found were, when I said just in case, so if I said, you know, if I was looking at do I stay or do I go, well, if I stay, I've got 12 months sick leave, so just in case I got sick again, I'd have the money. I still had my wig, which was just, you know, phenomenal. It was in a box somewhere, but I kept it just in case. And when I found this just in case place and looked at what fear I still had in my life, I was able to deal with it and, you know, consciously deal with it rather than pushing it to the side. And then say, you know, well, what I'm doing to live rather than stay alive is, you know, yoga, meditation is really important to me. I want more of that in my life. The job was a means to an end in the end, and I probably should have left a couple of years before, but for reasons I didn't. And once I recognised that I was there because of, you know, having sick leave in case I got sick again, it enabled me to make decisions that took that fear out of my life. And, you know, that was a process of really being honest about where I was and looking at life through different eyes and then breathing new life into the areas that I wanted to feel more of. And that was, you know, what in my picture of work looked like, wearing jeans to work, working for anyone in the world. What in my picture of health looked like, you know, meditating, yoga, healthy food, exercise, and then being able to breathe life into those things rather than breathing life into what I was scared of.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word fear, and I think sometimes fear can be very paralyzing and also get in the way of us realizing our vision and maybe living our life passion. But what advice would you give to the audience about how to overcome fear and push through that?
Okay. So I think there is more than one type of fear. So the first advice I would give is to recognise where the fear, or recognise who the fear belongs to. And the way I recognise it is if, so I'll give you an example around leaving work. And I had a friend of mine ring me and said, like, you know, you're crazy, don't leave work. You'll never get another job, and that was all his fear. And how I heard that in my head was, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And when I recognise that, when I, you know, have conversations with myself and I say I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that, and that belongs to me, when I hear you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, it belongs to other people. So I think the first thing is to recognise what's your fear and what's other people's fear, and then let other people deal with their own fear and don't let them put it onto you. And then ask those questions around, what are you doing to stay alive, or what are you doing to not have fear in your life? And for me, that looked like that just in case. So if you constantly hear things or constantly say things like, I can't, I won't, I don't, it's generally things that you're afraid of. And then
okay, so it's about, part of it is eliminating those words or those phrases from your vocabulary and the language and how you communicate.
And what sits behind them. So I think really looking at when you start to say that, what's driving you to have that perspective, and then how do you change that perspective?
Okay, and so you work with women to help them work through their fear, and there's a process that you engage in to make all that happen?
Yeah, so look, there's a number of steps that I go through that I've given to women to go through as well, and there's a couple of things around understanding what your why in life is. And whenever I had fear, I'd always ask why. So why am I scared? So if I was leaving work, why am I scared to leave? Because I won't have income coming in, because it's what people expect me to do. I don't know what I'll do if I don't work. I work, 80 hours a week. What will I do with all my time? And to work out why. Then once you're kind of at that layer, well, what happens if I don't have money coming in, and why am I afraid of that? And go down to the next level. Okay, well, it means that I might not be able to travel, or how do I pay my mortgage? Then you go deeper. So keep asking why until you get to the very base of what your fear is. And when I went through my cancer experience, I did that. And what I realised my deepest fear was that I was scared that if I died, my nieces and nephews would forget who I was. So it wasn't death that I was afraid of, I was actually afraid of being forgotten. So what I was able to do once I understood that, or if it was you, the same thing, I was able to be the best auntie I could be with those kids so that they would never forget me. So with each of the things that you have a fear around, look at what are the actions you can take that make sure that fear doesn't stay in your life. And that's a really good exercise. It's really about just understanding why and understanding what sits at the base of your fear, and then dealing with that rather than what's occurred. And the two,
Yeah, so it's peeling back the layers and getting to the core of what the source of that fear is. I mean, it could be many, many different things, but I think it's being mindful and aware of that, and then doing the work to actually deal with whatever the fear is. Sometimes it's, there's fear about dealing with the fear. So we have to get through that too. But I think we're coming to the end of the interview, and I want to make sure that you share information about how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to follow up and learn more about the work that you do and some of the books that actually you have been working on recently.
Okay, cool. So my website is gaicomans.com, so it's GAICOMANS. And I work on 3 levels with women. So the first one is about, if you've been through this survivorship experience, and mine was breast cancer, it was about elevating your spirits. And I interviewed Rhonda earlier, 20 women, and asked them what they wish they knew when they were first diagnosed. So then you have the perspective of 20 different women and what they wish they knew, so these just new tools to deal with. And then what did you wish you knew when you were finishing treatment? Because I didn't want women to go through what I went through, thinking that I was all alone, thinking that I was the only one that got supposed after treatment. And to set women up so that they don't go through that period of being down. And then taking through the next step that I went through as well, which was working to work out what your lifestyle factors are, working out how you want to feel in each of those and what it looks like for you, and then giving you some strategies to be able to action those, sort of bring those things, find your purpose, find your sense of self again, and focus on the ways that you can bring control back to your life, particularly after such an experience as breast cancer. And then the third stage I work at, which is really around how do I help women emerge back into being the woman that they want to be, rather than the survivor that they've become. And that's really about giving women the opportunity to say yes to life-changing experiences, where I'll take them to different places around the world and experience life with a very small group of women who are ready to say yes to not being a survivor anymore. And I've got the first one is this September, where I'm taking them to Tuscany for 6 days and having some amazing experiences through that. But really the women that'll say yes to that are women that have already said yes to that invitation, but they don't want to be survivors anymore. And they want to experience life in a very different way to how they've experienced it before. So there's 3 platforms around elevation, around empowerment, and then around emerging from survivorship.
Okay, and so how can someone connect with you? Do you have a website, or what's your email?
I do. So my website is gaicomans.com, GAICOMANS.com, and my email is gay@gaicomans.com. So GAI@GAICOMANS.com.
Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you say that again, because the video actually froze.
Okay.
So the editor will take care of this, but I just need you to repeat your website address again.
Sure. So my website is gaicomans.com, and it's GAICOMANS.com. And my email is gay@gaicomans.com.
Okay. And you're right now in the United States, and you'll be on this side of the world for how much longer?
So I'm planning to go to Italy in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm in the US at the moment. I go off to Italy in a couple of weeks' time. I come back to the US. I take the women back in September to Tuscany. I come back to the US, and then in about I think the end of October, I'll head back to Sydney for the summer and catch up with my family for Christmas.
Okay, so that's great. So you get to spend what's the equivalent of your winter here, which is our summer, but it's winter in Australia, and then you go back for the summer in Australia. That's nice, and you get to spend the quality time with your family here in San Francisco, or there in San Francisco, that you talked about in terms of being important to you.
Absolutely, and I haven't seen winter since 2008.
That's great. Okay, so thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today and sharing your information about how to live an empowered life. And so this is Rhonda Smith, the host of the Recover, Restore, Re-Energize Your Life talk show, the show where you learn how to live a more vibrant life from the inside out. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.